From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Gulf Coast studios in New Orleans, it's the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. It's Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the Jr. Very important. Remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, to share, to rate, to review. If you are watching us on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. We are so glad you have found us here. Please stay here. Hopefully the content you are desiring this sports season can all be found here on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. And we know because we see the numbers, you found us. So thank you and tell your friends. All right, Andre, Monday felt a little weird. The offseason is officially here. I enjoyed the heck out of the weekend with all the NFL wildcard games, great games, left and right, and Saturday, Sunday, had a blast watching those games. Had to go to a cheer competition for my daughters up in Baton Rouge. Enjoyed that. And then yesterday all day, just watched football morning, noon, and night. Big picture-wise today, of course, we're going to talk Saints. A little different twist to what we're going to talk about today just in terms of the offseason being here. But first things first, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It was weird having a, weekend of football and not watching the Saints, but, hopefully that'll change next year. Hopefully at this time next year, we finish watching football on a Sunday, and it was actually the Saints playing in a meaningful playoff game, and hopefully we're heading that way.
Yeah, and if you're anything like me, I kind of watch it. It's entertaining. Obviously, I love football, so I'm entertained. But I'm also viewing it through that prism. Okay, realistically, how far away are the Saints from these teams? Realistically, this year, what's winning, what's not winning, what's standing out, what's something that needs to be placed a high premium on? What are the trends that we're noticing with this round of NFL playoffs? Because let's be honest, it's much different looking this year. There's no Lamar, there's no Patrick Mahomes. So you're talking about a NFL playoffs that looks much different this year than in years past. So all those things sort of pop up when you watch the playoffs, at least when I watch the playoffs. And probably if you're a Saints fan, you understand that as well. But with that being said, Andre, this being the Saints podcast, this being the postseason, and this being an off-season full of optimism and excitement, but also work. There's still a lot of work to do, and I think it's a fun work this year because you feel like you're building something. I think it's very important to truly identify where that work needs to go to most, and that's why I wanted to go with the big picture here today.
Absolutely. We are looking ahead because we recognize that the Saints did improve this year, but there's still some improvement that needs to happen. So to look into that, we're going to talk about the Saints' three biggest needs going into the offseason. We're going to go back and forth, 3-3-2-2-1-1, and really identify where over the next 3 months, going into free agency, going into the draft, when you're looking at, restructuring deals, re-signing players, where the Saints really need to focus their energy. Yeah,
so we'll start with three. And I had I listed my top five, and then I did some mixing and matching and kind of process elimination. I got it down to my top three. So number three for me, this might be a little bit of a surprise given how much I've talked it up, but number three is wide receiver. Wide receiver, I think there needs to be some playmaking added to that room. I think there needs to be some stability added to that room. I think there needs to be some firepower added to that room. I think there needs to be talent added to that room. Why is it three, not higher on this list? Well, they still have Chris Olave coming off a career year. And you said it best. You said he may or may not be wide receiver one, but for the Saints, he had to be wide receiver one. And I think that holds true going into the offseason. At least you're not drowning in just nothing when you talk about that wide receiver position. You still have a guy in Chris Olave who is a guy that's proven he can be, at the very least, league-wide a high end too. But for the Saints, he can give you numbers that you need to give, and this was obviously the best year. And frankly, he's coming off of a year where he developed immense chemistry with young quarterback Tyler Shuck. So they still have Chris Olave. They still have Devon Vele, who I like. I really like. I don't like that he got injured, but I love the size. I love the ability to work between the seams. I love, again, there was a chemistry developing between he and Tyler Shuck. So Devon Vele, I think, is going to prove are going to prove worthy of that trade of the 4th-round pick they sent to Denver to get him. They also have, and this was brought up in Mickey and Kellen's press conference because he's a player we forget a lot about, that being Jalen Polk, who is a speedy guy, didn't play this year, was on IR, was drafted by the Patriots a couple of years ago. Clearly, it was someone the Saints had identified as someone they wanted to bring on because he didn't play much his rookie year, and the Saints were very quick to sign him despite him being injured. 6'1", 203. So that's someone they're excited about, but he hadn't done anything. He hadn't done anything. So this is where the numbers start to dwindle. You still have Mason Tipton, who I think, took some steps here and there as a receiver, but I think he's probably more. I think he was actually better, in my opinion, as a kick returner than a receiver. Kevin Austin Jr., who stepped up late. You forget about Bub Means. Bub Means is still on this roster. So I think you need to add. I'd be very curious the route they choose. Do they go veteran free agency or do they go draft? Like a lot of these needs are going to say, I'm going to bring up here, I think there's a strong chance they go both. So for me, the number 3 need for the Saints as they get into the offseason is at wide receiver. What about you?
Wide receiver was definitely somewhere that I was thinking about. But for number 3, I actually went into the trenches, the offensive line. But to be specific, the interior offensive line. I think you're good with those 2 young tackles right now. But when you look at the stats from this year, the Saints allowed 51 sacks. That's 8th most in the NFL. They had the 8th most quarterback pressures across the league, despite the 4th quickest time to throw. So Saints quarterbacks between Rattler and Tyler Shuck were getting the ball out quicker than almost every other team in the league, yet they were still 8th in being pressured and 8th in getting sacked. The Saints were also one of the least blitzed teams in the league. So it's not like teams were sending all these exotic blitzes at these young quarterbacks because they didn't have to. Then you look at the running game. Despite being top 10 in runs inside the tackle, Sean, the Saints were 31st in yards per play on inside runs. So the inside run game wasn't working. The offensive line as a whole is giving up a lot of pressures, a lot of sacks. You look across the unit, you got a lot of uncertainty at left guard with Dylan Redun's contract, Trevor Penning you trade away. You look at right guard, Cesar Ruiz is not coming off a very good year. And even looking at center, Eric McCoy, when he plays, he's elite. But you can't ignore the fact that he's missed 20 games over the last 2 seasons. And you really haven't had a solid backup to plug in for him that can kind of fill that void that he leaves out, because we've seen how impactful Eric McCoy can be, when he plays. So when I look across the Saints and the needs, I think you need to support Tyler Shuck. And you're going to sense that theme with all of my, positions of need that I'm going to name today. But to support Tyler Shuck, he's got to be able to have some time to throw. And to give him some time to throw, I think you've really got to shore up the interior of that offensive line. Now, let me be clear. You better not pick him in the first round of the draft. I do not want to see an offensive guard or a center come off the board at 8 overall. But in those middle rounds of the draft, maybe in the free agency where you will have money to spend, that's where I would like to see them address that position.
So number 3, you have interior offensive line.
Yeah.
Well, that is my number 2, interior offensive line. And I went back and forth with 2 and 3 because I initially had that number 3 in wide receiver 2, but I ended up flipping it. Why? Why did I do that? Well, I wrote out the roster and the names is what ended up happening. So you got Eric McCoy, you got Cesar Ruiz. This is the free agents you have, so these are not under contract. You have Luke Fortner, who I thought did okay as a backup center for a veteran. Dylan Redun's as your left guard would be not under contract, so he's a free agent. Fortner is a free agent. 2 valuable depth pieces. And you have Nick Saldiveri and Torricelli Simpkins, the guy everyone fell in love with the preseason, but by the time he was on the field during regular season, it was pretty obvious that to all of us that he was not quite ready to be in that role. So to me, when I look at the interior of the offensive line, well, let's just look at it. Eric McCoy, I think he's the best overall offensive lineman. He's probably a top 2 or 3 player on this roster. This is now back-to-back seasons. He will miss double-digit games. I love Eric McCoy. I think he can be one of the best centers in the NFL. But back-to-back years like that, now you're starting to get closer and closer to the he can't stay healthy label. If it happens again, obviously he will stay in that role. So Eric McCoy, great as he is, has not been consistently available enough the last 2 seasons. And I think last year, yes, but really going back 2 years ago when he went down, I mean, look how much everything faltered around him when he was not available. So his lack of availability has to me contributed to the lack of success when it comes to wins and losses. So if you're the Saints, you have to take that into account. Fortner and Redunds, I think, were two guys brought in here to be, reserve depth guys that stepped into starter roles, but they're both now free agents. So there's no guarantee those guys are back. I would love to have those guys back. I would love to have those guys back in that role, depth pieces for your offensive line, because I think when called upon, they did fairly good, but they're not under contract. So you cannot assume they will be back in 2026. Correct. And then you mentioned Cesar Ruiz. Cesar Ruiz is coming off, in my opinion, the worst season of his career. Did not look like the same player. Was a guy that, you get to a certain point in your career, the wall hits, and you're on the other side, and you start to see the downside of a player, and there's just the reality that perhaps he may have reached the downside of his career. We may be witnessing that in real time with Cesar Ruiz, because even when he was healthy, he just did not look good this season. He just had a rough year. So to add it all up, you do not have a starting left guard. Yep. Your starting center is an injury who is getting dangerously close to the injury-prone label, whose lack of availability has really cost you. And you have a right guard and former first-round pick in Cesar Ruiz, who, in my opinion, has taken a dip in his play. That trumps, in my opinion, the wide receiver need, because there's 3 out of 5 there you have legitimate questions about, although I'll listen to an argument for wide receiver being the number 2 biggest need on the team. So to me, interior offensive line must be addressed, and this is one I'm fairly certain you're going to see in free agency and in the draft. But I am totally with you, Andre. Do not mess around with the 8th overall pick selecting a guard. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. In fact, take a page out of the Eric McCoy playbook and look at it and say, I've had some success with interior offensive linemen beyond the first round of the draft. You can think of Eric McCoy. You can think of Jari Evans. You can think of Carl Nix. You have had guys that you've been able to draft mid to late rounds or middle rounds of the draft that you've been able to develop into very, very good football players. In Jari Evans' case, he might be a Hall of Famer. He should be, in my opinion. So that's the direction I feel they need to go. So number 2 need for me for the Saints is interior offensive line, and I predict they will address this both draft and free agency. What's up for you?
My number 2 is wide receiver.
So we flipped it up.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
flipped it up because one thing you just said, there's 3 of 5 offensive linemen that you have questions about. There's 5 of 6 wide receivers that I have questions about. Right. You look at Chris Olave, obviously you got to get the deal done this offseason. He's going to want to get paid. We'll have plenty of podcasts about how much he should get paid and all of that when we get to that time. But you look past Chris Olave, you lose Rashid Shaheed, you lose Brandon Cooks. And you really haven't found anyone to step into that Shaheed role. And Brandon Cooks, look at the Buffalo games.
That was great, man.
I mean, watching the Bills,
awesome, man.
Brandon Cooks is contributing for Buffalo. He couldn't do that here, but you look behind Chris Olave, you've got Devon Vele, who was really starting to vibe with Tyler Shuck and almost looked like Tyler Shuck's number 1 receiver until he got hurt. You've got Mason Tipton, who I was really hoping would step into that Shaheed role and, kind of be the deep threat on this team. He wasn't really able to do that. He made his biggest impact on special teams, like you said. Kevin Austin Jr., he had a few drops late in the season. He's a guy who's always sticks around. He's been around the last few years with the Saints.
He's fine as a 5 or 6.
He hasn't made a big impact. Dante Pettis, no big impact. He had the play where he fumbled, in the end zone a couple years.
Was it Tennessee?
Yeah, the Tennessee game. You got Ronnie Bell, who made the one-handed touchdown catch, but those 5 guys I just named, I cannot go into this season confidently and say that any of them they're the number 2 opposite Chris Olave. Because Chris Olave, whether you think he's a 1, whether you think he's a 2, without a doubt, since he's gotten here, he has been the Saints' number 1. And moving forward, he will continue to be the Saints' number 1 unless they get an absolute stud in the draft, which I think should definitely be somewhere they look. But even outside the draft, you look at the free agency. You've got a guy, 49ers, Jawan Jennings. Jawan Jennings, how often did we say over the offseason, The Saints need a big target. Jawan Jennings is a big, strong target that's done it in the regular season. I mean, he had a stretch this year towards the end of the season where he had like 7 or 8 straight games with a receiving touchdown. He's done it in the postseason. You know, Jawan Jennings, if you can bring him in via free agency, that's a solid number 2 opposite Olave. You look at a guy that maybe his price tag might be a little high for you, but a guy who probably is going to be the best receiver and maybe one of the best players in the free agency, and that's George Pickens. Now, he can be a head case at times, but when you put him on that football field, he's going to ball. I mean, even across from CeeDee Lamb, he was elite last year. So, and then you look at the Alec Pierce, you know, the one out of Indianapolis that's going to get a lot of, you know, looks. He's got a strong, you know, catch point, high catch point, but he's also a speedy guy. So when I look at Jawan Jennings, I look at Alec Pierce, I look at, you know, George Pickens, I'm looking at guys in the free agency that can contribute immediately with this team. Then you also look in the draft. You've got Mekhi Limit, and you've got, you know, Carnell Tate. You've got those guys in the draft that could also make an impact. So when I look across all the options that the Saints are going to have this offseason, I just feel like wide receiver has got to be up there with what you addressed.
Well, I think with wide receiver is there's a lot of recognizable names that could be attainable, and that makes it exciting. And I'm with you. Like I said, I initially had wide receiver number 2, but then I saw some of the names and interior O-line, and I know the way the Saints think. They're probably going to look to the trenches first. But there's the additions that they make at wide receiver, which there inevitably will be a couple. Either if they go free agency, those are names you recognize. If you go draft, there's going to be names like Jordan Tyson or Carnell Tate that you recognize. There's going to bring a level of excitement to the Saints organization that I think is going to excite the fan base. And that's what you need right now. And it's a good year to be in the market for wide receiver help, because I think you got to have some guys, both free agency and the draft, they should be able to look and possibly attain. All right, we're on number 1?
Yep.
All right, number 1 is, and I've talked about this on multiple shows, it should be no surprise, it is at running back. They don't have talent at running back. They don't have enough talent at running back. They don't have enough playmakers at running back. You know, I'm watching the playoffs, and I'm seeing, you know, running backs making plays. I'm seeing, you know, guys running play action, running backs catching the ball out of the backfield. And I look at the Saints, and I'm thinking that's probably a position they're as far away from these playoff teams in any other spot. You look at Alvin Kamara. Look, Alvin Kamara is probably a 2 at best at this point in his career. And look, I'm not even sure what does that entail. What can he still do? Is he still be a legitimate guy out of the backfield catching passes? Maybe. And where does that lead you? Okay. But I think he's on the downside of his career. Devin Neal, again, I like did some nice things, but at his best, what is he? Is he a 2? Is he a 3? Not a front tier talent. Kendre Miller cannot stay healthy. Audric Estime was a nice story, but you know, he's probably an RB3 at best. So you're talent deficient. And then you have severe health concerns for a lot of these guys. Remember, let's not forget, Devin Neal, a rookie, still is out for the year with an injury. He didn't play that much, but yet he still got banged up. AK, back-to-back years, did not finish the season. Kendre Miller, I mean, we talk about more off the field or not being available on the field than him, what he does actually on the field. So this team needs dynamic playmakers in the backfield. And just for this podcast, Andre, this morning, I'm at my house. I decided to do it. I decided to go ahead and rewatch Jeremiah Love again. And pardon the pun, I fell in love again. Because this was like, dude, I'm watching, I'm like, this guy does it all. And I'm looking, I'm like, against Miami, against Texas A&M. I'm like, so he's doing it against like legit defenses. And he does a lot. It's outside zone. It's inside zone. He's catching the ball out of the backfield. He's slow playing it where he's kind of setting up the cut. He's stopping, starting, stops. A lot of it felt like usually one guy kind of falls in one category. Man, I look at Jeremiah Love and I think, is there maybe some Saquon Barkley to his game? I mean, he's not quite as big as him, but is there maybe some Saquon Barkley? Then I'm watching the wild card round, and I named that because I Googled the free agent running backs. I'm like, just to see, and I see Travis Etienne. I'm like, that guy would fit in perfectly as a number 2 back here in New Orleans. 3,000-yard seasons, can catch the ball out of the backfield. This is a running back off season for the Saints. The number 1 need, Go get you a lead dog at running back. What about you?
I agree. Running back is my number one, and I've been banging that drum. I agree with Jeremiah Love. And I remember last year about this time I was looking at Ashton Genty and saying, man, if you could get Ashton Genty, that would be a home run pick in the first round. And his stock kind of rose as the months went along, and he wound up going, I believe, number 4, 5, 6 overall. Hopefully the same doesn't happen with Jeremiah Love, because I think that would be a home run hit for the Saints at the running back position, which they have not gotten enough from. I mean, you look last year, they were 28th in rushing offense, 30th in rushing touchdowns, 31st in 10-yard runs, which means there is no explosiveness in this offense. You look at Alvin Kamara, you look at Kendre Miller, Devin Neal, Austin Estime. I don't see a guy in those four that I would feel confident giving 15 to 20 touches a game at this point in any of their careers. You mentioned Kendre Miller, his health concerns. Devin Neal, his health concerns. Alvin Kamara took a huge step back in almost every facet statistically this past season. Austin Estime, I would need to see a lot more from Estime. So, yeah, I'm all aboard the train of, let's get a running back. You mentioned Travis Etienne. I also look across the league. I look at a guy who just kind of resurrected his year, Javonte Williams.
That was another
in
name.
Dallas.
Yeah.
Javonte Williams had Dallas rolling. Rico Dowdle, somebody who had an elite stretch in the middle of the season for the Carolina Panthers, and they kind of went back to Chuba Hubbard towards the end of the season.
What was that about?
I think that was a little bit of politics, because Chuba Hubbard's the guy you signed on a 4-year big money deal the offseason prior. So, you're looking at, them kind of going away from Rico Dowdle, and after the game, Rico Dowdle said, that drop in touches is definitely going to influence whether he comes back to Carolina or looks somewhere else where he can have a lion's share of the carries, and when Rico Dowdle was getting the lion's share of the carries in Carolina, he was running through Miami, he was running through the Green Bay Packers, who at the time had the #1 rush defense in the NFL. I mean, he was putting the team on his back, and they were winning games because of Rico Dowdle. You got a guy who, last we heard, was very upset in New York, in Breece Hall, He's
going to be top of the market guy, right?
Exactly.
You think he'd be a top of the market guy?
And I would pay top of the market dollar for a guy like Breece Hall.
I know that's Deuce's guy. Deuce loves him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And someone with his versatility in this offense with, a young Tyler Shuck. I would love to have any of those 3 guys, the 4 guys, if you include Travis Etienne. I just feel like when you look across this, team, yes, they need to be better in the interior offensive line. You need to be better and have more playmakers at receiver. But running back, there is no world where you can go into 2026 with these guys that we just named. It's just not going to work.
You need some top-tier talent in that room, and you got to get it some kind of way. And I know they haven't historically drafted running backs. It's been a while. Mark Ingram was the last one. Before that, it was Reggie. Before that, it was Deuce. Before that, was there was an era where you drafted running backs in the first round, and it kind of slipped. But you're going to hear me say Jeremiah Love a lot this offseason. Let's just put it that way. You're going to hear me say it a lot. So I got running back, line, interior offensive line, wide receiver. You have it running back, receiver, interior offensive line. So we're in the same boat, just maybe it's a little different order. But let us know your comments, because I also consider tight end and edge.
I thought about edge.
Tight end that really drops off after Juwan Johnson with what's available. Foster Moreau's a free agent. Taysom, obviously, we'll see what happens. Maliki Mataveo and Trayton Welch. Edge, I think they're going to add one because Cam Jordan's obviously a free agent, although I think he comes back. But I still think if you run it back with those 3 one more year, you're still going to get quality play out of that edge defensive end spot.
I actually would, if I had to go up to 5, my number 4 probably would have been linebacker.
Linebacker, okay.
Because I look at Mario Davis, and I've been saying it for years. If something happens, he has been Iron Man. Knock on wood.
That's the wood right there.
Yeah, we got some hardwood down there. He has been Iron Man. But if something were to happen to Mario Davis, if Mario Davis were even to decide that he wants to go play somewhere else, what would you have in that linebacker room?
It's true.
Pete Werner has not shown you in all of these years that he's been able to give you anywhere near what DeMario's been able to do. You saw some flashes from Danny Stutzman, and he played all 17 games as a rookie, but can he give you that? We don't know yet. So I think linebacker, DeMario's been saving your life at the linebacker position for a long time, so you really haven't had to address it.
They haven't really been forced to, because he's just always been there.
Exactly. But if something happens to DeMario, it's going to become abundantly clear how weak that linebacker room might be behind him.
That's interesting. It should be a fun offseason, because they got optimism, but they also have a lot of holes to fill, which I think will make the roster building process feel more fun this offseason than off seasons in years past. I wanted to get to this before we have about 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
I mentioned before, I really enjoy watching Wild Card Weekend because it was a lot of good games, really good games. Sorry about your Panthers. They played well.
Not well enough. Bryce Young needs to get up out
I'll get
of
your
there.
thoughts on him in a second, but I just wanted to kind of just point because I'm looking on X today, Twitter, and all of a sudden I look down and Kellen Moore is trending. I'm like, what? Turns out it's all Philly fans upset they lost him. So that was my biggest observation, how much Philly misses Kellen Moore, your New Orleans Saints head coach. So maybe a sign of things to come. I'm officially off the Justin Herbert bandwagon. Like, I'm done. I said this year was the year for me, and I'm finally be like, look, he can't get it done. He can't get it done when it matters most. And then, look, dude, Josh Allen battled. I mean, they won that game because of Josh Allen. Josh Allen battled, did more with less, got banged up in that game. And also, Christian McCaffrey still got it. What about you?
Oh, my gosh. Just the quick hitters. With the Eagles game, they are missing Kellen Moore.
Yeah.
And the Saints fans are glad that he's here instead of there. You know, Josh Allen, he did his thing, and this is his year. There's no boogeyman in Patrick Mahomes. There's no Lamar Jackson. This is your ride through the AFC. You know, Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson, year one for those two together, dynamic duo. Chargers, I said it before the year, I'll say it again, I'm tired of Justin Herbert getting included in conversations with Mahomes, Burrow,
I'm done
Allen.
with it, yeah.
Justin Herbert is not in their tier because he has not produced when it matters. And with the Panthers, that's a good team, but they are a quarterback away. If the Panthers had a good quarterback, they would be a team that could consistently make the playoffs. But Bryce Young is not good enough. He consistently shows it. I mean, people are praising him for a 50% completion percentage, interception of a game, and he had 40 seconds to gain 30 yards to try to kick a game-winning field goal. He couldn't get it done. Very disappointed in Bryce Young, but it was a great week in the games.
It was a great week in the games. And look, that's a tough position for the Panthers to be in. What do you do with Bryce Young? We'll find out. All right,
Get him out of
Andre
there.
Johnson Jr., Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.